Okay, this video is about the Lotka curve of achievement. So what this is about, it's about high achievement, because that's one of the things I think you get out of my channel. I'm interested in high achievement. I'm not interested in, getting a B in your high school class. I'm interested in how can you perform at the highest possible level. And so one of the basic things you're going to come across is a normal distribution, also called a bell curve Gaussian distribution. And what this will say is, let's say you center the average IQ at around 100. So a standard deviation is about 15. So one standard deviation of IQ is from 85 to 115. Okay? So somebody with an IQ of 130 would be 2 standard deviations above average. So they would have and that's comes out to about 98th percentile IQ. Okay, somebody getting up over, 135 is 99% IQ. But it does keep going. 99.5, 99.9, etc. Okay, well anyways, people tend to think, well, achievement is the bell curve, but it's not. It's actually a Lotka curve. Let me explain. The bell curve is good for the distribution of IQ, just general intelligence. The bell curve is good for things like distribution of height. But the bell curve does not work for real achievement. Okay, let me show you what that's about. Okay, by the way, I made a bell curve drawing for the vegan diet with regard to they're in the top 1% of people in health, low-fat vegans. So I said the typical people are, standard American diet, ignorant, sick people, meat-eating people. Okay, the health aristocrats, the top 1% are low-fat vegans, and then the half-screw. This is like a lot of doctors, lacto-ovo, pesco-vegetarians, the smarter ones, but they only do a little bit better. They don't do a lot better. All right, so let me start getting to the point of this talk. I'm going to show you now. Here's a little bit more of it dividing up, and this one they're just going to say that these are, the higher levels of achievement, the higher up you go potentially. And you can have a bell curve for single variable questions, okay? And here's another one, grading the average performers, high performers, top performers again, but there's something bigger than this. The Lotka curve is bigger than this. And here's sort of like where this comes from. This is this guy, Oscar Osicki, and he runs the great YouTube channel called Inside the Score. And I love two of my favorite quotes from him one was, resources are the enemy of creativity, meaning that lots of people keep on saying, I need more resources before I try to compose this song, before I try to write this book, before I try to do some other creative achievement, make this film, whatever. And what Oscar Osicki says is, no, you just have to do it. You can always make a second version of it later when other resources might come available. But most of the people, they never get around to doing things because they just don't have it the way they want it. But in life, you seldom get things the way you want. But anyways, now, the next quote I love from him is he says, becoming a composer is not one skill. It is a tree of skills. So this is just a drawing of a tree of life skills, okay? And he'll say, to become a good composer, you have to know melody, harmony, beat, and all these other things, okay? And he's a composer. He's a great composer, so that's what he thinks about. But what I'm going to get at is, let's say you want to become a great writer. Well, it's good if you know how to be funny. It's good if you know grammar. It's good if you know how to write a sentence with emotion. It's good if you know rhetoric, because those are emotion impact boosters, okay? It's good if you can add something to your book. Like one of the things I love, art. So I'll take these old paintings and I'll put them in quite often as metaphors, okay? It's good that I love religion and Christianity because it's so beautiful and it has the best art, and often there's a Christian metaphor to other topics that come up in science, and I know that science without Christianity isn't worth a crap because everybody just starts lying for money. Okay, so anyways, I collected quotes for many years, so that's another skill. I just have this encyclopedic knowledge of quotes because I've collected them for, 40 years. So all these things I start to factor in. I was around a lot of funny people, so I know a lot of funny jokes and a style of telling funny jokes. I studied a lot of history, philosophy, religion, so if I have a good little quote from that stuff, I'll pull it in. I know the biochemistry, the pathophysiology, the conventional medical stuff, the surgical stuff, so I can add all these things in. So what I'm trying to say is, what'll make my books great is that I can add all these things in. And there's other things that other people might have better than me. Eminem, for writing a song, he can rhyme better than I can. He can write a better song than me. He's magnificent at rhyming. Okay, but the point I'm saying is, to do something great in a lot of the creative arts, it's not just one skill, it's a bunch of skills. And because of that, that's why almost hardly anyone ever does anything great in these fields. because they have to have so many skills going for them. Okay? Like Michelangelo used to make fun of the other painters because he said they didn't know how to draw. Michelangelo could put the three-dimensionality of sculpture into his drawings. Okay, but I'm getting at something with this Lotka curve. This is one of the guys who was talking about this as well. This is Charles Murray, and he wrote the book on human accomplishment. And he talked about how, great achievement in a lot of fields, it's so rare. It is not a Bell distribution. It is not a normal Gaussian distribution. It is a Lotka curve. Now I'm going to show you the Lotka curve. And you want to know these things because if you're aiming to achieve in these areas, you better understand how the game works. Okay, so here's a Lotka curve. So a Lotka curve means that like what percentage of people will write, what percentage of doctors write a book, and it's a very small percent. It depends on how academic the places is. There's going to be a higher percentage of them at Harvard writing a book than at some small private practice community hospital. Of course, you could have 1,000 doctors in the community hospital and not a single one will have ever written a book. At Harvard, it's going to be like one out of every 100 maybe writes a book. No, it's not that many. I'd probably say even at Harvard, it's probably about one out of every 300 will someday write a book. All right, but what I'm saying is for people to write a really good book, they're really rare. For example, look at the greatest novels ever written. The vast majority of them all came from the 1800s. How come more great novels weren't written in the 1900s? Because there just weren't that many, Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown was a masterpiece, okay? Kingdom of Speech by Tom Wolfe, masterpiece. But there's not that many of those, because it requires so many more things. It requires very high level of knowledge, very high skill of writing. And then it also requires some marketing so people ever hear of it. But the point I made, like, why did I even make this talk? Because what I'm trying to tell you is if you want to be great at something, try to learn all those skills. Let's say you want to be a great basketball player, like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan wasn't just great at shooting, great at jumping. He was also great at dribbling. He was also great at defense. Okay? So what I'm saying is greatness in a domain is going to come from having multiple skills. So the smart move is be developing all of those simultaneously. Like some of the regrets I have in life. I wish I had learned how to draw at a young age so I'd be better at drawing. I could have developed that from a young age instead of wasting time in the public schools for 12 years. I wish I had read the Bible in detail cover to cover when I was a young guy. I read the Bible extensively, but I have not read, every note of it. I read thousands of pages of commentary, but I got bored in a lot of chapters. I didn't have that much time, so there were certain parts I would skip. So I wish I had mastered it in more detail. I wish I had mastered a couple other languages, but there just wasn't time by the time I became interested in them. So anyways, this idea of the Lotka curve, that very few people ever write a book, and the number that will write a great book is minuscule because it's so many skills have to go into doing it. So if you want to be a great musical composer, if you want to be great great scientist, let's say you want to be a great biochemist. Well, it'd be worth your while to also know mathematics. It'd be worth your while to also know statistics. It'd be worth your while to know organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, biochemistry, molecular biology, all this stuff. The more stuff you know, the better. Know genetics, etc. To be able to put it all together, because a lot of times great achievements come from connecting different fields. So anyways, this idea of realizing to do great creative achievement is going to come down to a Lotka curve. And if you want to be on the high end of the Lotka curve, the person's producing a lot of great creative work, you've got to develop multiple skills. So you want to get going on that as fast as you can. And it's fun to do. I like creative work. And I wish if I lived my life over again, I would have gotten started earlier to building up these skills. I would have studied the ancient Greeks, ancient Romans earlier, learned how to draw earlier, okay? Anyways, I hope you found that interesting.